ratcheting up of racial conflicts.
Well, a resurgence of nationalism, that's for sure.
Which is racist.
Not necessarily, because, I mean, would you call Vietnamese nationalism racist or Palestinian nationalism racist?
Well, I call any kind of nationalism that celebrates exceptionalism, which at least our version, as racist, because you, by elevating yourself, there's no kind of equality. You are immediately creating a hierarchy.
Okay. How about we rephrase this to call it a kind of regionalism, an attachment to place.
Right.
Okay. And maybe an attachment to the status quo as is. Like okay, let's say we cool with a certain percentage of white, certain percentage of black, certain percentage of Asian, but let's not disrupt this. Let's not cause too much more upheaval. I think I already see that happening. And you talk about coming back from Eastern Europe, and you see that in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
So I think people will have a better sense of community, in a sense that we want our community to stay put. We don't want any more disruption, because there's been so much upheaval. And I know it's a paradox for me as an immigrant to talk about this. I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you what I see. Okay, a kind of retrenchment of regionalism. We don't. Multiculturalism is over. I really think it's over, because if you're living in Manhattan, multiculturalism just means choices. Choices of places to eat, choices of babysitters.
Right.
But if you on at the bottom, when you have outsiders coming in all the time, it just causes so much tension and so much conflict and so much competition. People have had enough of it. And I know it sounds very pessimistic, and like I say, for an immigrant to say that sounds very bizarre, but that's what I see.
What gives you hope? What sustains you? Or maybe you're sustained by anger, which isn't bad.
No. What gives me hope is that I think people, when they have direct contact with each other, and most people have there's deep alienation in my book.
You write at one point, like television, the private automobile was invented to wean us off our own humanity. From each, we've learned how to amp up our impatience and indifference towards everything and with life itself. Anything that's seen through a screen or windshield becomes ephemera, with its death nearly instant. You don't have to switch channels or run over it. It will disappear by itself. All screens and windshields have been erected to block us from intercourse.
You've talked about the same thing, about the tyranny of the image.
Yeah.
Okay, so people hardly know where they are. They can be in Osceola, they can be in Jackson.
But all looks the same.
They all look the same, because they're all looking at the screen. Okay, so.
Well, but also the strip. I mean, I did a book on the Christian right, so I was going around to lower income cities and I was moving from city to city as you did, and I sometimes forget: am I in Detroit or am I in Cleveland? I didn't, because you're just one long Burger King, and you can't even tell where you are.
People can be sitting across from each other and not see each other. That's across the country. So my hope is that as this system breaks down, the sooner the better for me, actually. People can rediscover each other's humanity, and they can deal with their neighbors. And I think people are actually very accommodating. They know how to, to respect each other. And I don't see that at the moment, because, they've been bombarded by nonsense from elsewhere, by media centers that have nothing to do with their own lives.
I just want to end by reading the end of your book, because it kind of symbolizes what you've done with your brilliant writing and reporting. Stories make a place. Without stories, there is no place. But without place, there can still be stories. If your stories are not organically grown but imposed on you by those who hate everything about you, then you're virtually dead. After the last Centralian, this is a town destroyed by coal mining, has come home to be buried, you talk about how it's an empty town and people just come back to be put in the graveyard. The town will be just its cemeteries and a section of lost road. Buckled and cracked, it's filled with graffiti, much of it erotically inspired. In a way, what you're doing is telling these stories before many of them disappear. And that's a kind of an attempt, I think, to kind of recover before it's eviscerated the humanity of the places you write about and the people you write about.
I actually think whatever observations I've been able to make will become more obvious, with each passing year. So this book will become, right now, some people might see it's outlandish. Like, what are you saying? But I think, my messages will become so clear with each passing year because this is the future, I really believe.
And you nailed it brilliantly.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was Lynn Din, author of Postcards from the End of America. The failure of our capitalist democracy was collective.